What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 66 of Sales Stories in Real Life. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople share their stories about memorable buying experiences. Today, we've got the head of sales at pclub.io, Meredith Chandler, in the building. Not only is she head of sales, but she runs merediththesalescoach.com. Again, merediththesalescoach.com for one-on-one coaching for AEs and sales teams. Meredith, very, very excited that we get to make this happen. I hear you had a very memorable buying experience when you were looking for an interior designer. What the heck happened there?
I sure.
Before we get started, I want to introduce you to Lead Feeder. We all know the struggle of identifying website visitors and turning them into valuable leads. Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, track their behavior in real time, and seamlessly integrate it all into your CRM. With customizable notifications, lead scoring, and GDPR compliance, Leadfeeder is changing the lead generation game. Head over to leadfeeder.com, leadfeeder.com for a demo today. Now, back to the conversation.
I sure did. Yes. For my first home purchase in Salt Lake City, I wanted to really make the house a home. I was so excited. I've been saving all my commissions checks for this over the years. And I was just so excited that I really wanted to make it optimally enjoyable and aesthetically pleasing. And so I wanted an interior designer. And so with that, I used an app at the time called Thumbtack. And I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's kind of like TaskRabbit, where you can kind of put your project out there and people will bid on it and they try to win your business, which I really, it's an aspect I really enjoy about the platform. You're not kind of begging them, they're soliciting you to work for you. And so there were five main takeaways from this experience that led me to choose the interior designer that I did. And the first one, and a lot of these, all of these are actually transferable to B2B sales. So the first one is responsiveness. So, especially to the initial inquiry, I had some interior designers that didn't respond at all. I got auto replies within seconds, which are still fine. I still, got the warm and fuzzies of, okay, my message isn't just floating in the ether. Somebody's read it. They have an auto reply. They might even be with another client right now, which is also attractive. They're concentrated on their work. They're going to get back to me in 24 hours per their auto reply. Some didn't get back to me at all. Some got back to me a few days later when I had already contracted somebody else. And so, again, we see this all the time with B2B sales. I've even worked in orgs where they time the amount of seconds it takes for somebody to reach out. So, number one reason that I went with the interior designer, responsiveness.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Have you ever wanted to start a podcast but have no idea where the heck to get started? Send me a DM on LinkedIn, and in just 2 to 3 hours per week, I can teach you how to start and maintain a podcast. Make your voice heard today. Start a podcast. Now, back to the conversation. Perfect.
Number, yeah. Number two reason, price range. So again, we see this all the time in B2B. Not every company chooses to post their pricing online. And so it's hard to know, am I even within the ballpark range, right? Am I going to waste my time? Am I going to waste this interior designer's time having even an initial conversation? Because you and I are both working individuals working throughout the day, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 60 minutes. It adds up to just have an initial call. And if you're going to price me something way out of my budget, it's a waste of my time. And so the interior designers that I selected for the first round of interviews, they had their prices clearly listed on the website. One interior designer charged by the hour. There was another who had bucketed options. So you had to buy a set amount of hours up front. And I would ask, well, what happens if we don't use all the hours? And they told me, well, you'll have it later on for add-ons, which is a nice objection handle, yeah. I'll give them a little credit there, but if I don't use it, I lose it, right? And so the interior designer I went with had the most attractive but also clear pricing up front.
Perfect.
The third point would be, now this is something I wasn't expecting, and we don't always see this in B2B sales, but they offered additional services for a one-stop shop. So think about a house, right? And let's imagine that is empty because it was. You maybe buy a sofa, you buy some chairs, dining room table. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, but on my budget at the time, I was buying a lot of Wayfair and some nice stuff, but middle price range, and it's still going to require some assembly. And I don't know how to assemble furniture. And, maybe that's very clear to the interior designers, or maybe they just see this time and time again. But the one that I ended up selecting preemptively offered me her network of handyman. So, hey, if we buy the furniture from this vendor within your price range, you're going to have to set some of it up. And if you go with me, I have these handymen. I've already checked their availability. If the furniture arrives on Monday, they can be there Wednesday and installing it. So just making it as easy as possible for me to go with them as a one-stop shop. And again, sometimes we see that in SaaS and B2B, and sometimes we don't. The fourth point would be seeing their customer success stories, or in this case, their working portfolio ahead of time. So when I went to their profile or their website, I could see the projects they've completed in the past, and I could read reviews. And obviously they're only going to highlight their 4 and 5-star reviews, right? But being able to see pictures of homes that they've done and see if the style is along the lines of what I want really helped me make a decision. And so we see that with B2B sales and in SaaS sometimes with customer success stories, right? Are they in the same industry? Are they working on the same initiatives? Are the KPIs that we're both measuring similar enough? And so that was a big selling point. And then lastly, the fifth reason that made it easy for me to select the interior designer that I did was they had a process. So, okay, I like your work. I like your portfolio. I like that you can offer me additional services, and the price point works for me. What do I do now? Well, some interior designers had a process and some did not. And so from there, I can tell who's done this enough times and who's maybe still working out the kinks, which, no fault to them at all. But at that period of time, I was, I work a full-time job. I didn't have excess time to kind of be the guinea pig. And there are times and places where you can be the guinea pig, but this wasn't one of them. And so the interior designer that I went with had a very clear-cut process. Okay, so what's going to happen next is I'm going to come over to your house. I'm going to walk through your space with you. We're going to go room by room. You're going to tell me what you want done. I'm going to see your existing style. We're going to look at color palettes. We're going to look at textures. Then I'm going to put together a virtual vision board, and I'll give you 2 to 3 options for each item. And then you can virtually select them. We can move them around. You can ask for alternatives. And then either you order them if you want the credit card points, or I'll order it, bring it all to my house. So you don't have to worry with shipping and schlepping and all of that. And then I had other interior designers who offered to build everything virtually with me at the same time. So essentially we hop in a Zoom room and they say, we're going to do the shopping together. That way I get the feedback in real time. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to see, how the sausage is made. I just want you to do it and deliver it to me on a silver platter. Sorry, lazy buyer. But again, very relevant to our B2B and SaaS worlds, right? Your customers want a process, and a lot of times they want it to be silver plattered. And so those 5 things made it very easy for me to select the interior designer that I did.
So many questions that I want to ask. Number one, I think you hit the nail on the head. So many parallels to B2B sales here, and even other types of B2C sales. So like my wife and I right now are shopping for a condo, and we're having a great buying experience with a realtor, and I can really relate to not only the process, but like having the team ready, right? Like you mentioned that, hey, if you need a handyman, the furniture will be there at this date and I'll have the handyman there at this date. So to your point, like some people want that white glove service where everything's just done for them and they don't have to do anything. And some people are down to be a little bit more DIY, but you got to do a little bit of discovery in order to figure out like what buyer you're dealing with. And so with us, like we had an inspector go into a property and then our realtor said, hey, if there's an electrical issue, I have an electrical guy. If there's a plumbing issue, I have a plumbing guy, right? And it's just like we don't even have to lift a finger. And to your point, like you said earlier, like everything is just processed and you could tell that they've done it before and you just feel very secure. It's almost like there's no surprises. Like they're taking away all the surprises for you. How do you see sellers use that in their sort of everyday processes, let's just say? Like you're obviously in the game yourself. How do you kind of let your prospect know, like, hey, I know your world so well that I know what you're going through now, and I know what you're about to go through, and then I know what you're about to go through next? What would you say to that?
Absolutely. And I've seen so many different sales cycles, either through reps that I've coached, reps that I've directly managed, companies that I consult with, demos that I take to purchase tech for teams that I've run in the past. And I think it comes down to 5 demo mistakes to avoid for our B2B sellers and our SaaS sellers. And I think the first one is starting immediately with your demo or pitch. It's an absolutely horrid experience to hop on the call and say, hey, Alex, how's it going? Or hi, Meredith, excited to speak with you. Our product is XYZ. And I can see, Alex, that you're kind of cringing there on the receiving line because I
I
know
could have
you.
just watched a YouTube video.
Yes, yeah, you would never do this, but it is shocking how many reps do this. And maybe they do it without even realizing, or maybe they're trained to do this, but just like when you're buying a condo or when I'm, searching for an interior designer, you want to open up with some questions. And they can be as simple as, what brought you to this call today? Anything, because otherwise you're not going to know if they're an even relevant buyer or not. If your buyer's looking for A and you offer Y, wouldn't you want to ask them, hey, what are you looking for? So you can be like, oh, that's not us. Let me spare us both 30 minutes and I'll talk to somebody who can buy and you can talk to somebody you can buy from. Uh, so that I think is the first biggest mistake. And then, if not even that, research who you're speaking to. It takes 30 seconds today to pop open a LinkedIn and, know the title and have an idea of what's going on in their world. It's again crazy how many people get on trying to sell to you and open with, well, how long have you been there? What do you do there? And your credibility just plummets immediately. I think that's the first mistake that unfortunately sellers make in demos today. I think the second mistake is talk ratio. So Gong came out with an excellent study, and I forget the exact numbers, but the ideal talk ratio, I mean, common sense is about 50-50, right? Or 45-65. I look at a lot of the ratios of reps that I've had, again, reps I've coached or companies that I've consulted for, and you'd be surprised. A lot of the talk ratios are reps 70, 75, prospect 30, 25%. And yeah, you're nodding your head because it doesn't feel good. Think about any conversation you have, right? And somebody's dominating it, and then you add on the layer of them trying to sell you. Super cringe.
Yeah, that's painful. That's painful.
I think the third biggest mistake, and I think this is a flaw in training as a whole, I don't think that enablement teams maybe have gotten around to this yet, but I see a lot of reps asking for the buying process and procurement process on call one. So, okay, if you like what you see, who else is going to sign off on this? What's your budget for this? How long is that going to take? Is legal going to have to see this? And your prospect is sitting there thinking like, I haven't even seen the product. I don't even know what you do. What is your company again? What's your domain? And you're already asking them essentially to sign you a check. It's just, you haven't earned that right. You will get to a point on the second, third, fourth call to start sprinkling those questions in, but berating them on the first call before they've even solidified if you're a fit or not appropriate.
Is this like an exercise to see how much Alex can cringe? Because if so, it's succeeding. But let me take a moment to pause here. If any of these apply to you, like this is a learning experience. Like let's take the opposite side of the coin and understand what a buyer could be thinking during these things. And rather than making it seem like we're trying to poo-poo on those folks that are doing these things, we want to see you get better. So feel like it's necessary to set that stage as I'm over here cringing through my eyeballs. Please continue on. This list is great.
Yes, not an exercise to make you cringe, but an interesting exercise. Now that you've paused us, Alex, could be for your listeners. Pull up your last 3 or 4 calls, and if you have a call recording, just look at your talk ratio. Are you in that 70 to 80 talk ratio range?
Right.
And if so, what can we do to kind of lower that or to make it a more even conversation? Or if you're in the 50-50, great, kudos to you. What can we do to even get you down to the 40-60? So I think that could be a worthwhile exercise instead of how many times can I make Alex cringe?
I do have to poke in a question here though, because I feel like it's so relevant. Let's say somebody does feel like they're in that 70, 75, 80% talk ratio, right? And they just maybe feel like I can't get my customers to open up, or my customers are giving me one word answers, right? I imagine a lot of those people that are doing it aren't purposely like, let me talk this person's ear off the whole time. Maybe they're getting one word answers and they feel like they need to carry the conversation. What advice would you give to those folks that want to flip that talk time upside down?
Yeah, if you're getting one word answers, you're likely asking yes or no questions, right? Because that's really the only way that somebody can give you a one word. Whereas if you were to ask an open ended question, it requires your prospect to give at least 5 to 10 words. And once they start talking, you'd be surprised how long they can go. So if you do find yourself in a high talk ratio, I'd encourage you to listen to your call in its entirety. And if you find yourself asking close-ended questions, jot down how you could change those into open-ended questions and try those on your next call instead.
Great advice. Great advice. Let's keep going down those five bad demo tactics. You're right at the end there. And then I've got lots
Yes.
of questions for you afterwards.
Number 4 would be not having a process. So again, I know a lot of our B2B sellers, a lot of your listeners might work at startups. And so the process might be murky from time to time. So try to recommend as firm of a next step as you can and recommend it yourself, right? So oftentimes I'll be on the receiving end of a demo and the seller will ask, well, what do you want to do from here? I don't know what your sales process is. I've never evaluated this particular tech. I don't really know what my options are. Do I get to try before I buy? Do you need my credit card right now? Is there another technical dive that I need to take? Your prospect needs to be led and you need to be in the driver's seat. That way they feel confident again that you've done this time and time again. You know what you're doing, but also you can drive them to the outcome that you're looking for. So whether that is a free proof of concept or getting their checkbook or what have you, you need to be driving. And then once you get to the end, mistake number 5, and this could be at the end of the cycle or throughout in general, not following up. So if you have a call, send a recap email. It doesn't have to be right after because a lot of us are in back-to-backs. Set an admin block at the end of each day where you send your recaps, or set an admin block at the top of each day to touch your open opportunities, send them blogs, send them collateral, let them know that you're looking forward to the call tomorrow. So just be in constant contact with them. I had one vendor recently and I had to beg for their pricing. The AE just fell off and I was a very active buyer and it got to the point where I even had to hunt down their SDR to contact the AE to provide pricing to me. And I could tell, yeah, this was, now you're really cringing, but I could tell at the very beginning of the cycle that this was going to be a rough one. And from there, it only got worse. So, again, constant communication with your clients, stay top of mind, make them comfortable and confident that you can help them with their evaluation.
I'm glad that you ended on this one because this is one that I'm passionate about and I feel like doesn't get talked about enough is the updates and staying in contact. And obviously everyone knows, yeah, of course, don't lose contact with your prospects, but like even when you get a question and you don't know the answer, reply and say, "Hey, I don't know the answer. I'm getting you an answer," right? Or, "Hey, you can expect a reply from me within 24 hours." I don't think people really understand how far that goes. And it's really easy to feel like we need to have all the answers all the time, like right away, when just like telling someone, "Hey, I'll have you an answer in 24 hours." And in 24 hours, if you still don't have the answer, "Hey, by the way, I don't have the answer. I'm still working on it for you," goes, at least I found in my experience, goes so far. Have you ever had an experience like that? Have you ever coached people on something like that where, say, like you're getting into the sticky part of a sale and you don't necessarily have the answer to a question, but you want to stay in contact, or maybe the seller feels like they don't necessarily have a reason to reach back out? Like how would you recommend folks to like stay in that loop of communication?
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. If you don't have the answer, a lot of reps, to your point, will wait until they can get it to reply, but you nailed it. Best practice is great question. Let me go ask, our product team, our engineering team, our support team. I've even coached reps to, and again, if you're at a company where this is feasible, where you can even CC that person, like, oh, I'm going to go ask product. I've CC'd them in here. I probably won't be able to sync with them till the end of the day. So you absolutely nailed it. If you can take it a step further, tag someone. If you are worried that you just don't have anything to touch your prospects with, touch them with a value add of some sort, whether it's a blog from your archives or a recent post that your company let out, or a lot of companies right now are hiring, so reposting their hiring posts or tagging people in your network that it might be a good fit for, interacting with their content. It doesn't have to be emails all the time. It can be LinkedIn social selling, or sending them podcasts or anything of the sort.
That's great advice. And I have to say too, I really love how you approach this because I feel like the point of sales stories in real life is to kind of flip the traditional sales podcast on its head, where it's like sales tip, and this is like, well, what about the buyer? And I feel like most guests that have come on, like not to for better or for worse, have kind of talked about like best buying practices. And you kind of flipped that on its head and did it backwards and talked about like some of the worst things that people can do on a demo. And oftentimes I feel like that's a nice perspective shifter. And maybe someone that's been just ingesting best practices constantly, maybe it's not as relatable as to like, "Hey, these are the wrong things to do." And kind of realizing that, oh gosh, I've been doing this. Let me flip it back on its head for you. What do you notice some of the best sellers do during demos?
Yes. So the best sellers, I mean, to keep it easy on us, probably do just the inverse of some of the mistakes that we've been discussing, right? So the best sellers open with a clear agenda and objective. A lot of people will mistake building rapport as talking about the weather or your sports teams or whatnot. I'm a firm believer, and this is an unpopular belief, that you don't have to start with chum talk at the top of the call. You can build rapport. And I had an amazing sales leader, shout out Nick Feeney, who taught me this many moons ago. And he said, you can build rapport by respecting somebody's time and getting into business. And I just love that, because you can still be friendly and open up a call and say, hey, Alex, excited to work with you or to talk to you today. I noticed on your LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. And so we're going to be talking about XYZ, anything you want to add to the agenda. You don't have to start with, hey, Alex, where are you calling in from? Which you could pull from your LinkedIn. Is it sunny there? Oh my gosh, it's so cold, cold here. So, to answer your question, I think best practices are opening up with a clear agenda and objective, driving the sales call as the sales rep, asking open-ended questions, having an even call ratio, and providing value throughout the entire cycle. So goes back to our follow-up touches, sending blogs, relevant industry information, etc.
I love this episode because everything just like ties back to each other. It's like, a little twist and turn, but then it comes back to those same kind of fundamentals. And that's like what I feel like we're losing in sales today is like we're losing the fundamentals because it's just like AI and blast people and, like I said, like sales tip, and it's like people are just like throwing out like sales tips when it's like it makes no sense. So I love this just like get back to fundamentals and like I can't remember who posted this. I saw somebody post this. Please let me know if I'm forgetting this person. But like 5 or 8 minutes of a 30-minute call, right, is like almost 25% of a call, right? If you kill that first 5 to 8 minutes BSing about the weather and how was your weekend, like that is really precious time that people in theory came to see a demo. So this is something for someone who, again, maybe this is you. This is something that I've used, and Meredith, I'll ask for your take after this, is I've started many calls by saying, hey, I know that we don't have much time together today. I want to make sure we can make this as value dense for you as possible. Do you have any questions before we start? Right? Some sort of iteration of, do you have any questions before we start? Otherwise, I want to make sure that we can get started and you could see what exactly it is that you were hoping to see today. Do you have any sort of iteration that you recommend, or maybe like, I don't want to say a template, but like somewhere where someone could start from and use it as a starting point to make their own?
I really like your template, especially saying, I know we don't have much time, because it prefaces the truth that you don't have much time. So let's not talk about the weather, and I'm going to provide value. So I really like that. I usually throw out an agenda and I ask if they want to add anything. So, I put together a rough agenda. I figured based on, what you told me before the call, because I'm usually emailing them before, prior. That's another tip. What do you want to see tomorrow?
Right.
Based on what you told me, I thought we could cover these three things. Anything you want to add?
Great way to say, hey, I did my homework. This is what my homework said. What did I miss? Right. Like, I think that's an important part too, is like having a POV, but then being willing to have them correct it, which is, I think, like the most important part, because then someone's leaning in, right? And like we naturally as humans want to correct, right? And it makes that person feel heard and feel seen. And kind of like you mentioned, like you're not asking where their location is or what their title is, like easily researchable information. Like you're asking for a priority list that candidly they're not going to give you. Right? Like you kind of have to take a stab at it on your own and get them to correct you there. That's a really, really great piece of advice. Maybe kind of piggybacking off that, you could take this whichever way that you want to. For our sellers that are still listening in, we appreciate you all. What would be the one big takeaway that you would give from the episode? Like, obviously, you came with your two lists, very, very prepared. So sellers already have a lot to take away. What would be the one biggest takeaway that you'd leave them with, Meredith?
My biggest takeaway would be, if we go back to the talk ratio exercise, I think that was a great idea, Alex, where if you're listening and if you have a call recorder, go in, pull up 3 to 4 calls, look at your talk ratio, because customers want to feel heard, and they're not going to feel heard if they're not getting in any of the talking.
It is timeless advice. Timeless advice. Two ears, one mouth, right? That's one I know that we've all heard before. Meredith, this has been absolutely fantastic. Like I mentioned earlier, you have Meredith, the salescoach.com working. I just had a lisp there momentarily for some reason. Why don't you plug some with the audience before we leave? What are you working on? What can people come to you for? How can people find you? Tell us the whole nine.
Yes, I'd love to connect with any and all of your listeners. You can find me on LinkedIn, Meredith Chandler, or if you come to merediththesalescoach.com, I work with a lot of AEs on one-to-one coaching, deal strategy, pipeline reviews, interview and negotiation coaching as well, and larger trainings for companies. So whatever you need or want, I'm here to help.
MeredithTheSalesCoach.com. Go check it out. Go follow Meredith on LinkedIn. Meredith, Meredith, last name Chandler for our folks listening on Spotify that may not have video. Meredith, this has been absolutely fantastic. And by the way, I didn't get to say it until now. Congratulations on the house. From what is visible in your background, it looks like the interior designer did a great job. So clearly, it was a buying experience that not only had relations or ties into B2B buying, but it also came out fantastic. So congratulations on all of that. And thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We'll see you next week. Cheers.